A player who never played a single point in Cincinnati just jumped 2 spots in the world rankings. And if that doesn't tell you how violently this tournament tore through the WTA Tour, nothing will. Because by the time you finish this breakdown, you're going to understand exactly why the last hardcourt stop before the US Open turned into one of the most brutal, most unpredictable weeks women's tennis has seen all year, with a defending champion getting punished for her own success, a 36-year-old proving she's nowhere near done, an 18-year-old American announcing herself to the world, and a 21-year-old from the Philippines quietly, relentlessly writing history, one ranking update at a time, and her name is Alex Eala. And you need to remember that name because it is not going away. But before we get to her, and before we get to the very top where the world #1 somehow survived a round of 16 exit with her crown still intact, we have to start at the bottom of this top 30 and work our way up, because every single place on this list tells a piece of the story of what's coming at Flushing Meadows. And honestly, some of these results are going to make your jaw drop. So buckle in, because the Cincinnati Open is officially finished. The rankings have been recalculated, and the road to the US Open just got a whole lot more interesting. Starting with the players clinging to the bottom of the top 30 and fighting for their tournament lives. Because at number 28 we find Barbara Krejcikova, 30 years old, representing the Czech Republic. And her week in Cincinnati ended almost as soon as it began. A first-round exit that cost her 110 points and dropped her 2 full places down the rankings. And when you're already fighting to stay inside that top 30 bubble, a loss like that stings. It's the kind of result that puts real pressure on the next few weeks. Right as the biggest tournament of the season approaches, one spot above her at 27 sits her countrywoman Marie Bouzkova, 28 years old, and her week was a little kinder. A run to the round of 16 that still cost her 75 points off the board, but was enough to let her hold her exact position. No movement, no drama, just survival. And honestly, in a week this chaotic, simply staying put counts as a small victory. Then, at 26, we get our first real, feel-good story of the list. Emma Navarro, 25 years old, American, climbing 2 full places after a round of 32 finish, added 55 points to her total. And while a round of 32 run might not sound like headline news, on American soil with the US Open bearing down, every single point of momentum matters, and Navarro is quietly building hers at exactly the right time. Number 25 belongs to Anastasia Potapova, 25 years old, who suffered a first-round exit that cost her 25 points. But here's the thing. The players around her also stumbled just enough that she held her ground anyway, unchanged on paper. But you have to imagine it didn't feel comfortable living through that week. And then at 24, things get a little messier. Elise Mertens of Belgium went out in the very first round, bled 133 points from her total, and slid in the wrong direction entirely. A rough week for a player who's usually one of the more consistent names on tour. But consistency took a hit for a lot of people in Cincinnati. And speaking of bouncing back, at 23 we have Madison Keys, 31 years old, who looked sharp again. A quarter-final run worth 95 points that pushed her up 1 spot. And if you know anything about Madison Keys and hard courts, you know this is exactly the kind of form you want to be carrying into New York. She's a former US Open champion, and any sign of rhythm this close to the tournament is worth paying attention to. Then at 22, Anna Kalinskaya of Russia, 27 years old, reached the round of 32, but still lost 150 points in the process and dropped a place. A reminder that even making it a round or 2 further doesn't always protect your ranking if you had points to defend. And right above her at 21, Magdalena Fresh of Poland, 24 years old, actually climbed 2 places despite also bowing out in the round of 32, gaining 53 points along the way. Proof that sometimes the rankings shift not because of what you do, but because of what everyone around you fails to do. And that's the chaos era we're living in right now on the WTA Tour. Now here's where the story starts to get heavier. Because at number 20, we arrive at a result that genuinely hurts to look at. Jasmine Paolini, the Italian who stood as Cincinnati's runner-up just 12 months ago back in 2025, watched 649 points evaporate from her ranking and came crashing down 5 full places. And this is the brutal side of tennis that casual fans rarely think about. When you make a deep run one year, you're not just chasing a trophy the next time around. You're defending an enormous pile of points. And if the title doesn't come with it, the fall can be steep and merciless. And Paolini just found that out the hard way, right above her at 19. Ekaterina Alexandrova of Russia, 31 years old, lost 320 points after going out in the round of 32 and slipped 1 place. Another name sliding quietly in the wrong direction while the tour reshuffles itself around her. And now, right here at number 18, we arrive at the story you've been waiting for. Because here she is, Alex Eala, 21 years old, representing the Philippines, and she climbed 2 more places this week to reach a brand new career-high ranking. And get this, she only picked up 5 points in Cincinnati. 5. That's it. But it didn't matter, because the players above her stumbled hard enough that Alex simply walked into the space they left behind. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because this is the story underneath the story. Alex Eala is not making headlines with a title run this particular week. She's making history simply by being consistent while everyone around her implodes. And that is arguably a more sustainable path to the top than one spectacular tournament. Because every single time this ranking sheet gets updated lately, her name is higher than it was before. And there is no player from the Philippines in the history of professional tennis who has ever stood where she's standing right now. This is uncharted territory for an entire nation's tennis history. And she is doing it not with fireworks, but with the kind of quiet, steady accumulation that tends to build careers that last. Remember that name, because if this pattern continues, by the time the US Open wraps up, we could be talking about her in a completely different context. Moving on, at number 17, we get a genuinely remarkable story tucked into the middle of this list. Sorana Cirstea of Romania, 36 years old, a player who's been grinding on the professional tour for close to 2 decades, reached the round of 16 in Cincinnati and climbed 2 places for her trouble. And in a sport that is increasingly dominated by teenagers and players in their early 20s, watching a 36-year-old push back into this territory is the kind of story that deserves way more attention than it gets. It's a testament to longevity, to adaptation, to simply refusing to fade quietly. And directly above her at 16, Diana Schneider of Russia, 22 years. Russia, 22 years. Old, actually reached that same round of 16, but still lost 330 points and dropped 2 places because she had a mountain of points to defend from a previous result and couldn't quite cover the payments due, which tells you everything about how unforgiving the ranking system can be. Reaching a good round isn't always enough if the math was already working against you before the tournament even started. And now we hit one of the wildest data points on this entire list. Because at number 15 we find Victoria Mboko of Canada. Just 19 years old, and she did not play a single match in Cincinnati. Not one. She wasn't even there. And she still climbed 2 places straight into the top 15. And if you needed one single data point to prove just how much turmoil ripped through this tournament, that's it, right there. An entire nation's worth of contenders fell hard enough that a teenager sitting at home still moved up the mountain without lifting a racket. That's the kind of week this was, and it sets up perfectly for number 14, because here's where we get chills. Eva Jovic, 18 years old, American, reaching a stunning brand new career high at number 14 in the entire world. And her result in Cincinnati was a round of 32 finish, which on paper sounds modest, almost forgettable. But when you're 18 years old and that modest little result is enough to push you into the top 15 in the world, That's not a modest story anymore. That's a statement. That's a teenager announcing that she belongs. And with the US Open on home soil coming up next, an 18-year-old American sitting inside the top 15 is exactly the kind of storyline that could define the next 2 weeks of this sport. Right above her at 13, we find a name that didn't move at all. Naomi Osaka, sitting quietly. She wasn't in Cincinnati. So her ranking stayed frozen in place, but make no mistake, she is absolutely watching every single one of these results unfold from a very comfortable position. A former world number 1 who knows exactly how quickly this list can be reshuffled again the moment she steps back on court. Then at 12, Belinda Bencic of Switzerland, 29 years old, went out in her opening match, but her ranking cushion was thick enough that she stayed securely inside the top 15 anyway. Stable, unshaken, simply riding out a rough week without real damage. And now we're closing in on the top 10, and the stakes only get higher from here, because at 11, agonizingly close to cracking that top 10 barrier, sits Marta Kostyuk of Ukraine, whose quarterfinal run added 150 points to her total and pushed her all the way up to just one single spot outside the top 10. And you can practically feel how close she is. She can smell it. One more strong week, and she's there. Then at number 10, Amanda Anisimova of the United States, 24 years old, backed up a quarterfinal appearance in Cincinnati with 180 points added to her total. And her grip on a top 10 position is looking less like a temporary visit and more like a permanent address these days. Right above her at 9, Elina Svitolina of Ukraine went out in the round of 32 but still scraped together 55 points, enough to hold on to her 9th place spot. Resilient as she has been for her entire career, a player who has weathered every kind of storm on this tour and always seems to find a way to hang on. And now, at number 8, we arrive at the single most painful fall of this entire tournament. Because this is where Iga Swiatek lives right now, the defending Cincinnati champion, a player who actually reached the semifinals this time around, which under normal circumstances would be considered a genuinely strong week. But here's the cruel arithmetic of defending a title. The points you won a year ago simply vanish off the books, and Swiatek lost a crushing 610 points in the process, crashing 3 entire places down the rankings in a single tournament. 3 spots. Gone. Just like that. And if that doesn't perfectly capture how unforgiving this sport can be at the elite level, nothing will. You can play well. You can reach the Final Four of a major tournament. And you can still watch your ranking collapse simply because you didn't repeat last year's miracle. And that single result just tightened the race at the top of women's tennis considerably heading into New York. Right above the fallen champion at number 7, Karolina Muchova of the Czech Republic, 30 years old, withdrew from Cincinnati early and didn't move an inch, watching the chaos unfold around her from the safety of the sidelines while everyone else absorbed the damage. Sometimes the smartest move is simply not playing at all. Then at number 6, we get another career-high story. Linda Noskova of the Czech Republic, 21 years old, went out in the round of 16, but still climbed 2 full places to reach a brand new career-high ranking of number 6 in the entire world. And that tells you just how fast this ranking race is moving right now. Players are climbing into new personal territory, not always by winning trophies, but by simply surviving the carnage happening around them better than everyone else. And right above her at number 5, Mira Andreeva of Russia, only 19 years old, exited in the round of 16 and still climbed 1 place straight into the top 5 of the entire world. 19 years old, top 5. Just sit with that for a second. Because we are watching a genuine changing of the guard happen in real time on this tour, and now we are into the final 4 names, the ones that truly matter heading into the last major of the year. And number 4 belongs to an American who just had the week of her life. Coco Gauff, 22 years old, defeated Jessica Pegula in an All-American Cincinnati final. collected the full 785-point haul that comes with lifting a title, and rocketed up to 6,740 points. And she is now gaining real, tangible ground on the players sitting above her. And with the US Open on home soil just around the corner, a Coco Gauff riding this kind of momentum is a genuinely dangerous proposition for absolutely everyone left in that draw. Right behind her at number 3, Jessica Pegula, 32 years old, went the distance in Cincinnati, made it all the way to the final before falling to Gauff, and held firm at 7,265 points, her position at the top of American tennis, staying exactly where it was, unmoved, unshaken, still one of the most dangerous competitors on tour. Then, at number 2, Elena Rybakina of Kazakhstan made a quarter-final run, but still shed 175 points in the process, and held at 8,141 points. Still second in the entire world, still an enormous threat at any major tournament she enters. And finally, we arrive at number 1. And here is where this entire chaotic week gets put into perspective. Because Aryna Sabalenka lost in the round of 16, dropped 95 points off her total. And she is still, after all of that, the undisputed world number 1 heading into the US. Open with 8,575 points to her name. And that single fact right there tells you the actual size of the lead she built earlier this season. A lead so massive that even a disappointing early exit in Cincinnati couldn't touch her throne. But here's the thing. Every single player behind her already understands that gap is not going to sit there forever, and every single one of them is hunting right now. So let's pull this all the way back together, because that is your complete, updated top 30 in women's tennis heading straight into the final Grand Slam of the year. Sabalenka survives at the very top despite the early loss. Swiatek pays the price for defending a title and tumbles 3 spots. Eala keeps climbing, quietly, steadily, into territory no player from the Philippines has ever touched in this sport's history. Krejcikova and the rest of the bottom of the top 30 scramble to hold their ground. An 18-year-old American named Eva Jovic just cracked the top 15 for the very first time in her career. And somehow, almost impossibly, a player who didn't even compete in Cincinnati still moved up 2 full places simply because the ground shifted beneath everyone else. That is the level of unpredictability we are walking into as the tour packs up and heads toward Monterrey for the Guadalajara stop before the tour makes its final turn toward Flushing Meadows. And once that happens, every single point on this list becomes fair game again. The hard courts are set, the rankings are reshuffled, and there is a very real argument to be made that we just watched the opening act of one of the most unpredictable US Opens in recent memory. So here's the real question heading into New York. Does Sabalenka's cushion hold up under the pressure of a slam? Can Gauff carry this Cincinnati momentum onto home soil and turn it into something even bigger? Does Swiatek respond to this fall the way champions usually do, by getting angry and getting better? And how much further can Eala climb before the entire tennis world is forced to start talking about her not as a rising story, but as an established contender? Because right now, every single signal points to her name showing up higher on this list the next time we do one of these breakdowns. And that alone should have you paying very close attention to the Philippines' brightest tennis star heading into the biggest fortnight of the season. This is where the real drama begins. This is where rankings stop being just numbers on a page and start turning into seeding, into draws, into who has to face who and when. And if Cincinnati taught us anything at all, it's that absolutely nothing about this US Open is going to go according to plan.